Mrs. Brown, congratulations on a 27-minute IEP. There you all.
We are ready. Yeah, we gotta get people focused.
Man, that was quick. Welcome, glad everybody's here, glad we can get things kicked off. And I'm glad everybody found their way through the back door instead of walking through all the hallways and all kinds of things like that. So thank you very much. Agenda for tonight is going through and finalizing our ground rules. Talking about the initial opener as what we're doing tonight. Future bargaining dates on our next meeting agenda. For future bargaining dates, we do have a June 10th. Was that correct, Michelle? Date
Yes.
added?
Came out today, yeah.
Okay, that one came out today. So it is a June 10 somewhere.
Here,
Here.
Okay.
here,
At least the tentative.
4:30.
Okay. And we're continuing to work on what we need for other possibilities and things like that, just to be able to squeeze in as much, because once you mention July, everybody's saying, we're out.
Yeah.
And justifiably so. So that makes good sense. We are not scheduled to meet next week. We are scheduled to meet the week following. As we get into the proposals, we'll have some conversation about possibility of information being shared in between. If there are some pieces that it seems most fitting to do that, to be able to have information in the hand group, questions ahead of when we formally get back together again, if that's it and decide to be a good thing. So. Questions, comments, thoughts? All right. So we talked about ground rules last time. And I took the corrections that we had talked about, taking out the word. Can't even remember what it was anymore, but it was really about respect rather than being comply. Thank you. That it really truly is about being able to have it be a positive piece of terminology instead of took out where 3 is now, there was another number ahead of that because we had thought we were meeting last week. And so that we pulled out of there. So we've said the first active bargaining session will be held today. Parties shall sign the final ground rules and both parties will present their initial written proposal minus articles related to compensation and insurance. I believe you have compensation and insurance. We do not, and we will tell you the rationale as to why we don't. And that's really the piece of the puzzle that I was talking about, to say, if there's something that we need to be able to provide in between now and 2 weeks from now, might it be something that we could send to you and Jason to share with your group ahead of that meeting? It's just food for thought in being able to consider that as a possibility. I think that those were the only changes we had in there. So I'll let you go ahead and look through that and.
I think we're good with all
Okay.
For technical reasons, my colleague to the right notices that on number, it says in reference to number 8 above. So does that,
Number 7.
In reference to number 7.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's the number I'm trying to-
Okay. Nicole, are you the signer?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, it's not really set up for this.
All right, I could turn it into a paper airplane, but that probably wouldn't be the best. I just, oh. Yeah,
Correct.
It's just a revision change. Okay. Bought the house, originally.
okay, given that, you can start, we can start wherever you wanna go.
All right.
Yeah.
You can start. So we have one packet coming your way, and then when we wrap that up, there's one additional paper we'll pass out to wrap things up.
Given that, you can start, wherever you want to.
So I'm gonna go through and just give some basic explanation and overview, and hopefully, obviously, people have questions that they want to get into, we'd like to respond to those. I'm gonna be relying on folks from our team to fill in some of rationale as to why, so I'll give some kind of basic overall explanation, and then they're gonna be chiming in to talk about where this is coming from, because we have several kind of priorities that fit into these categories that come from surveys and data from the membership, and so they're gonna chime in and relay that when it comes around. So we're proposing a 2-year contract.
Okay.
On the table of contents page, you'll see that there are red highlights of the articles that we are opening. So the status of agreement page probably needs to be updated with the date on it, but if it's not red, then our proposal would be to roll forward the status quo language that's already there. We didn't print that in our packet. There's a note at the bottom about some additional items that are there. One is about a facilities proposal that we have that is separate. It could potentially be merged into another article, but we have that separate as part of our proposal. And we also have, we don't have with us tonight, but because no new issues provision, we wanted to raise the conversation topic about a sick leave memorandum that we engaged in, and whether there is, we need to make any updates to the contract that memorandum. So
Okay.
that's a discussion topic that is, we don't have anything with us tonight. We just wanted to double check with you to make sure that that's not something that we need to, that would have had an expiration date on it.
Okay,
Okay, so the first proposal then comes in Article 12 on the school calendar work year, work day, and it really hits into one of the priorities that we have, and that's related to special education and feedback that we had from our special education members about workload concerns and ways to keep them effective and related to some of the scheduling around IEP meetings and some other things. So we're not gonna read through this word for word, but I think we've got some folks who want to speak to that.
So just kind of in summary, we're asking for 48 hours notice when an IEP meeting is being put on our schedule, and if we're not given 48 hours, the opportunity to time card some extra hours, up to 3 hours, to actually write the IEP outside of our school day, since we're teaching and holding small groups at the same time. We are asking for IEP meeting limits, so no more than 1 IEP per day, more than 3 IEPs per week.
can I just ask a quick clarifying question?
Yeah.
This is for special ed case managers.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was interpreting right.
Yes.
Thanks, sorry.
We're asking that IEP meetings that we try to avoid scheduling IEP meetings before school. Generally, they are scheduled at a time when our clock starts, so 7:30.
Excuse me.
But then that rolls through, like for me, first period, but for other special ed teachers, it rolls through like bus line pickup, things like that. So it gets really difficult to manage those drop-off supports. So that's kind of a summary of what we're asking for.
Clarification, on 4 and 5 have are colored numbers, but there's no.
Yes.
So 4 and 5, there was an error in the original contract, there was a letter C there, so the numbering just needed to be corrected, that's all.
All right.
Thank you for, I
Yeah, no
meant to
problem.
say something about that.
Is that the same
We
thing?
just wanted to highlight that there was a change there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, all bets are off with the numbering schemes and.
Yes, but I just didn't want it to.
No,
look
it's
like there was a
perfect.
change to the numbering, I just want to make sure it was
I
highlighted.
appreciate it.
Okay, we all set for 13?
Here we go.
Article 13 gets into another kind of priority issue that's been raised from the membership, and that is about. This is our maintenance of classroom control and discipline, and this is about, there are kind of these tracks that kind of go in and out here with our, that have to do with systems issues about how we're dealing with discipline issues, high need discipline issues as they evolve, and then how some of that later on folds into legitimate safety concerns. And so there's this safety concern element that you'll hear about, but also this section that is focusing in on really procedures. And so we did a couple of things here that is worth noting. There's a paragraph D that is struck through. That's not eliminated entirely. There are some updates to it, but it is really the new B paragraph that we are proposing with just a couple of changes. And there's a reason for that. The beginning of this article starts with the discussion of this concept of written student discipline procedure. It's there. And so we're talking about this kind of overall, like overarching generalized procedure that I think, from our perspective in recent years has needed more kind of fine tuning and digging into, but we speak to this concept of that, and we feel like it gets confusing sometimes reading through the article because we would be talking about written student discipline procedure and then moving on to something else. So we have a preference to see all of the written discipline procedure elements included right at the beginning of the article so that we can see those together. Next, there is a section of the language that gets into more specialized that's been there historical, like specialized discipline plans or ones that are for children that are struggling to be successful under the written student procedures. So they need some more specialized program going on and some other things related to the handbook. So some changes here. That's the kind of rationale with the order of things, but the specifics about the changes that we have, I'm going to let the team jump in on and start reiterating some of that.
I'll talk about the first part. The concern, even though the current language is in there, it's that consistency of making sure it's brought up at the beginning of the year. And that it's brought up in all buildings and that it's a collaborative process with the teachers. And so that everybody's on the same page. If any updates need to be made, you are definitely going to hear tonight consistent messages regarding student discipline and safety. I'm just giving you a heads up. So this is one of those that that every year we're freshly looking at plans. We're looking at processes and we're updating that information. So I'll let others speak into the rest.
Yeah, and just making sure that those student discipline procedures are looked at every year and just kind of touched on every year, and that they're just kind of updated and that information is shared with staff. And staff has an opportunity to ask questions and make sure that they understand how it works. So that's kind of the thinking behind A. The thinking behind B of adding the admin or behavior specialist language is kind of if there's dangerous student behaviors, we just want to make sure that there's someone trained who can remove that student from that class and environment.
A designate, a who.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who are we
That
calling?
was missing in the previous D. Yeah, below.
Oh, go ahead.
Or C, just kind of talking about that wrap back communication, making sure all of this discipline stuff is properly filed. And that wrap back communication is made with the teacher, so the teacher knows what happened with that discipline and how the parents responded, and kind of just a closing bow on some of that communication.
I'd like to address on C2 is the consistency across not only the schools, but within their own admin at the schools. Multiple schools have more than one admin, obviously, where some schools will document, but not every admin follows up the same or even follows up. And then so communication back to teachers. Some schools will document in Synergy, some schools use Google Docs. It's just, the real concern is a lot of times some of our students, it's critical that formal documentation is made in order to move up the chain of process. And that's not occurring. And so, and not only is it not occurring, teachers are not communicated back to, because usually, most likely, the steps weren't followed to complete the.
Specifically chose to say reporting teacher / homeroom teacher, because sometimes an IA is writing a referral, sometimes a special ed teacher, teacher, music teacher is writing it. Sometimes it's the classroom teacher, but all of the adults that work with that student, you know, if something happens in music, the music teacher needs to be followed up with, as well as the classroom teacher.
For D, this is just to make sure that whatever classroom teacher gets brought into those meetings is a teacher that actually works with the student. There have been cases in the past where other professionals in the building have been brought in instead of a student or a teacher that works directly with the student.
Okay.
So just making sure with making those plans, it's with a teacher that works directly with that student.
And E seems to be self-explanatory about just making sure the handbook, student handbook is up to date and posted. And anytime a change is made, that it is updated there.
And communicated with staff
And
before it's posted.
Yes, thank you.
What was that, Shelley?
Communicated with staff
Communicated, okay.
before it is posted.
Will we ever do updates to the handbooks mid-year?
It's rare.
I'm gonna say, I don't
It is rare, yeah.
remember it ever happening when I was teaching, but who knows?
Any other questions about that?
Have two minor things. One, as somebody who has written a lot of this type of stuff, while I love specifically referring to Synergy, I know that no system lasts forever, and I'm wondering if we could be a little bit system agnostic in that language and say student, official
Information
student
system.
record,
Yeah.
whatever the words
We're
need to
open
be.
to update some
Yeah.
language on that.
And then this came up last time, we bargained as well, but I would like it if we could remove gendered language whenever possible, so. Under point B, the principal or his or her designee, I think we could just strike the his or her entirely, because it would be principal
Or
or
designee,
designee.
yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Right here. 13.
Oh, I thought you said D, sorry.
Oh, no.
I think that to your point, student information system is the standard term for like the SIS or whatever, if you.
Close, I said, student record system.
You were close.
Town are so
Yeah.
close, but yes.
Okay. Next, we get to Article 18. On insurance, so
You have, if 14 was included here, was that just a mistake? Because there's nothing red in it.
Or it just concludes the,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
just a printing thing.
Okay, sorry.
yeah, that is.
Yeah, I looked at that and I thought,
That's-
no.
13 goes over to the next page, that gets confusing or not, but the safety paper.
Thank you.
Not that. Okay, so we've got these overarching language concerns related to discipline and safety, about special education and some access to tools to be able to do jobs successfully. But overarching priority from surveys from the members surprisingly is compensation. So, that is there, and coming at it from this first article in insurance, you know, we look at the insurance, the language, we made some successful progress, we believe, last time in negotiations by addressing the cap. It still continues to be a concern for us. It's one of the lowest in the state in terms of average, and so we feel like that there needs to be continued, aggressive addressing of that. So that's why we proposed to follow up on what we did last time and increase the cap by $100 for each year of the contract. Another thing related to insurance is that we're trying to address everybody kind of with some equal, when we do some calculations of the costs with these to these different categories. When we increase the cap, we keep it so that folks that only require single party insurance are being able to obtain that, and we stay competitive on paper there. When we deal with the pool and D, that's how we're able to offset for our folks that require full family insurance or the two-party insurance with a spouse or kids. Those folks are paying out of pocket. And one of the issues that we have is that not only are the OEB insurance rates going to go up, they're capped at the amount that they can max out each year under the law. So that amount is like 3.5% average, but they are taking away from the integrity and the quality of those plans to offset it. So increasing deductibles and out-of-pocket costs. And so when we have folks, for example, who are in a full family category, they need that pool. They're still paying hundreds of dollars out of pocket each month for the lowest quality plan that's offered. And so that's like, we're just trying to help in that regard to keep them in the mix there. So that's why we put that $35,000 to increase the pool there. We also have another good chunk of people who opt out of insurance, which their opt-outs also provide the ability for the district to be able to afford some of these in the end there. We want that to be competitive, but to be able to give them some recognition monetarily in that regard. So we have proposed to increase the opt-out amount by $100 a month from $300 to $400.
Thank you. I see it now. Like, I'm looking for color and I can't find it.
The red doesn't always fit at the top of the next page.
Okay, thank you.
Those are three pretty straightforward. There are no major changes to the language. We're sticking with the same system and increasing amount.
So you said, just a clarification, you said $100 per year of the contract. Are you proposing that it's $1,200 for 25-26 and $1,300 for 26-27? Or just saying we're adding $200, which is equivalent to $100 per year?
No, they're right. It's
13
because of
and
the
14.
it's because of the date changes, the date ranges. So actually, people right now
1,200.
are at 1,200.
Right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So-
because they updated the year also.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took me a minute to do that, but yeah, that's,
1,300 next year, 1,400 in the second year of the proposal.
Thank you.
All right, on the compensation end, and we will let some folks, speak to that. I think insurance is straightforward on the compensation end. This is a concern related to inflation, other costs, so we're evaluating not only where inflation has been, where it could be, but what localized inflation on the housing market and rent, people's ability to be able to keep their head above water looks like in light of, I think that we all would be hoping that we would see some more money coming from the state. That's not yet, finalized, but we went around a lot on this, and at the end have proposed 6% increases on the salary schedule for each year of the contract, so 6. Before we get into some of that other stuff, I'll let the team get on this.
I want to say that, like, the whole idea, I know I've been a part of bargaining before. We did talk about this a lot as a team here. Jason referred to the fact that we had sent out surveys to our members and everything. We're not trying to come in here with a high number or a low number, or like, we're coming in here with our number. We're not trying to play games with the district. We're not trying to say, hey, well, maybe we'll shoot for this and this will happen. That's our number.
That
Like,
fun game.
we
Yeah.
promise you, we are not trying to do that with this one. This is what our members are needing. And like, for example, I had multiple members just email me saying, I'd love to be there tonight. I have to work tonight. They have to have a second job. That is the reality of what our members are dealing with. And so that's unfortunate that they can't just go home and spend time with their families. They have to take a second job to even make ends meet for them. So I just wanted to emphasize that we're not trying to inflate a number on this one. This is really what our members, and like, we understand that budgets are tight everywhere, and we get it, our budgets are tight. So that's the point we're trying to make.
My personal experience, I live alone, and I don't live in a place that I'd love to be in forever. You know, I'm okay with it being temporary, but you know, there's like concerns about mold, and there's things that I'm like, I probably should get out of here, but I'm very limited in where I can go next. Because I don't want to spend over half of my paycheck on rent. I'm very smart, and I feel very limited in the options that I have.
Similarly to that, I live in Lebanon. I can't afford to live here. So I drive 35 minutes to and from work.
That was the other side I was thinking, is if you don't live close,
Yeah.
then you spend it in mileage.
And I'm sure there's many members in this audience right now would be like, I could share my story. I could share my story. And we don't have a lot of time for that. I know we'll touch again on this, but I just really wanted to emphasize that we're truly are like, put the time in. This is the number that we really feel comfortable and confident with.
Okay.
Okay, so there are just some like technical updates that are in here when you look at 4 and going into 5 on the next page. We did some work last time where we did some modification on salary schedule stuff to get to our final agreement. We're proposing to eliminate that and just go back to what the more normal language would look like around this state movement and the experience stipend and so forth. That was a creative alternative that we came up with last time, but this proposal just says, let's go back to normal on that. It's been a long time since Appendix D has been addressed, and the concern that we have is specific to, there are 3 sections that are there: athletics and activities, and then there's district level positions that are stipended. Our concern is with the athletics and activities section, so we're proposing to increase them by the same rates as the COLA there.
I can happily speak to that. I have coached in this district in the past. However, as a parent, I have 3 daughters who either have gone through Willamette middle school and high school athletics or are currently going through it. And honestly, I think that you would be hard pressed to find our quality of coaches anywhere in the state. And I think that our trophies and the trophy case show that, but more than that, you know, through COVID, like we have a lot of the same coaches we had through COVID. That was a hard time. Through COVID, 2 of my daughters really struggled with suicidal thoughts. My mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and it was the coaching staff who stayed in, I mean, obviously teachers did, but our coaches stayed in touch with my girls and they checked on them regularly. They know their grades, they know their interests. They give more than 100%. They coach year round. You know, I mean, it is a beautiful thing that we have going, the support that our coaches give. And it's been a long time since we've increased the compensation. And I really do feel that we have a coaching staff that is quite deserving of that, and our activities people. I mean, we put on amazing plays, our cheer team went to nationals, it's just. We do a lot of great things in this school, and it's done by a lot of teachers, and I just think that they should be compensated for their time.
And my hunch is you will hear that there's not gonna be a huge argument probably in that co-curricular world, because we know that it was not addressed for a variety of reasons in the last session.
I'll just echo, the elementary, music program is incredible and has not been adjusted for years and years and years. And there's a lot of extra hours put in there that we haven't looked at as well.
Yeah, it's across the board.
Okay. 11 and 12, so the first one, on 11, we're dealing with issue that can be, that might be a little bit tough to track,
Excuse me.
except for the people that are kind of in the know, but recently, and we don't know how long it's gonna go on for, but recently there has been a trend at Oregon State for teachers to be able to graduate with a dual bachelor's program. So they put in the time and the extra components of that to get 2 degrees. And in some districts, they are offered column placement on that, and that's not happening now in Philomath. And part of the reason gets back to this history of you have your bachelor's degree and you take additional coursework after the fact.
Excuse me.
After, which makes sense, and we're not trying to upend that. But we have some folks that have been in the bachelor's column that we believe could be recognized by getting ability to be able to move over a column for having that dual bachelor's degree. And also, if we hire new people, that they should have that as well, so.
So, for example, a lot of them will have like a math and teaching, so they have their BA or their bachelor's in math, and then they also have a bachelor's in education. Where like myself, I have like my bachelor's and I had my master's in education. The classes are almost like identical if you draw a line for these individuals. And so it's unfortunate that they've been stuck in a BA column just because of how the program at OSU has been set up. They have been like financially kind of punished that they didn't have those additional credits, even though they took them, but they didn't have them after their first BA. They got them, and so it's just, we want to see something recognized with those and have them move over to a BA plus 30 column.
Quick question, do we know how many extra hours they have to take to get a dual bachelor's? And are any of those have to be graduate level courses?
There are a lot of them that they're very similar, and we can go into.
Oh, I'm just curious.
To that area, and we can show you some examples with everything and actually have transcripts and stuff that we can take a look at too.
Okay. On number 12, just give some background on this one. One of the things that we did, and we'll bring some of it up later, is that we intentionally tried to make connection with newer hires in the district and asking them about what their needs are, you know, especially, I think that when I've heard speaking from our team, what people have relayed to me, and I've seen on my own personally, but that we have good folks that want to be able to stay and flourish, right? Whether it's rent, which is a big thing, live close by, obviously that's huge and drives the salary schedule part. But there are other things like, what can we be doing, or what would have made your transition even that much better so that we can keep future people there? Some of them, it was just raised. I'm coming from a place that had a national board certification. You know, there are different variations that are out there. Column advancements, stipends, different things. We propose to advance one column if somebody obtained that. Because we're trying to be responsive to that, really frankly, people saying, that would be cool. I'd like to be able to stick around and do that. So that's why we have it.
Do we have anybody, right? I guess I know we have some. Do you know how many we have in the district right now that have national board
I
certification
don't know
already?
for sure. We have not asked exactly
Okay.
how many in the district, so we don't have an exact number.
be curious to see how many we have and how many are working on it.
Mhm.
Because I know at one point I was considering it and then I just.
And I think because it's not an option in the district, that maybe some choose to not, but if this became back, maybe more would be interested in pursuing something.
As the only non-teacher, non-administrator at the table, can you explain what the national board certification is?
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Actually, I made some notes for myself. So it takes 2 to 3 years to get it, and then it has to be recertified every 5 years. It's a very rigorous process where you basically demonstrate that you are an expert in your field. It takes an average between 200 and 400 hours of work, and only 71% of teachers who actually go for their boards achieve them. So it's a very rigorous process.
Thank you, I really appreciate that.
It's a very rigorous process, and you basically demonstrate that you are
Okay. So Article 20 is that next tie into what I was just talking about. Article 20 currently is policy handbook, and it has kind of really brief provisions about board policies. We felt like that this could be a good place to put in some standards around new teacher orientation. And so this is, the team's going to speak to this, but this is back to exactly what I was talking about before, us connecting with newer hires and then saying, how can we make your experience that much better for future folks?
Starting off with the lead distribution, we've had people in the past at our site at Clemens that they are newly hired and they get their keys and then, you know, they assume they have the keys they need and then they discover when they need it, this key doesn't work for this door, like, I don't, wait, can we compare keys? Like, I don't think I have that key, which one is that? And then they're having to go back to the district office and
Setting off alarms when they need to get in and decorate their classrooms and.
Not getting keys during orientation, but having to go get their keys later. I'm not getting access to their classrooms right away.
We had a teacher who had to justify why they needed a key to their department's office and why they needed a key to the library, which is where they make copies. So if that could be, made a little bit easier. We've also had a teacher who didn't get a key card until 2 weeks ago when the new key cards were handed out, which means that they could not access the front office because the only way to get for teachers to access the front office is through the vestibule and using the key card. So.
As far as technology, when it comes to that section on for new hires, I know, for example, we had somebody new in the district and they didn't have even a laptop and I ended up having to give them a laptop to even do their work, even their first week. Just they need some assistance when it comes to how to retrieve passwords, how to log in to more than just their laptop. There's other websites that they need to have access to. Like logging into the student information systems or any kind of user agreements, all of those. It's always then put onto like somebody else to make sure that they have access to information. Just to even do updates or changes in like a W-2 or anything like that. There's just not a set policy and process in order for new hires to go through as a checklist to make sure that they have everything they need when it comes to logging in and access to technology, or even where to print.
Yeah.
Like, you just hit print and it goes somewhere. Like, where in the building did it just
We
go?
typically have a 4-hour orientation for those new folks. And some of us have been mentors in that process. But it's like drinking from a fire hose for that new person. And then for weeks, they don't know or feel uncomfortable asking multiple questions of that same person who's really only paid 4 hours. But over months is asking all of these questions as they come up and as that person is coming up for breath, learning all those new things in our building, it really needs to be shored up.
And then making sure that all new hires know who the admin that will be performing observations. To make sure that's clear, that it's not moved around or changed or anything like that. So, all new hires, understand with multiple admins in the building, who's the one that will be conducting those observations and putting that information into a system that they will, be able to review later on. Also, it's really important too, to our members that if they were brought into any meeting that could lead into some disciplinary action, that the admin, I believe, know, that they should. Members have the right to have another union member in the meeting. So if that member doesn't realize that it could lead to a disciplinary action, we're asking that admin make sure that they start off the meeting and asking them if they would like union representation at that meeting. And so that's really important to inform them, the member of their rights, then, because we don't know, they just were called into a meeting with you, or, and so we don't have any forewarning of that occurring to even let them know. We do our best to educate them, but like we said, there's so much information thrown at them that it'd be really great if that was, just one of those things that's, asked. And then, I'll go ahead and talk about the policy handbook too. That they received the most, new hires received the most updated versions of the contract. And kind of,
Oh, of the CBA. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm with you. Yep.
and then alarm, that's really important. We always have new hires that are setting off alarms or locked in the vestibules. And it would be really great if, and not only that, just sometimes even notify old staff that what the alarm codes are.
Yeah.
But really, it's important to have those new hires to know how to access the buildings, to make sure that they are informed of when the alarms are set. So they know, and the process in which you sign in, so people know who's in the building on off hours too.
Or who you make sure you get in touch with, because you know they're always there.
Yeah.
So, yep, got that.
And what to do if you do set off the alarm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yep.
28, so, we have a proposal about interview committees for vacancies, so there was some concerns raised by the interest from our end about having more of a formalized licensed staff participation in interview committees.
That is, if, let's say you're hiring a third grade position, that all members of the third grade staff have the opportunity to sit on that interview. Let's say if you're at the high school and we have, let's say, like a social studies position that opens up, then other social study teachers would be allowed to sit on that interview panel if they're willing to. They have the most knowledge about standards and curriculum and expectations for their departments. And so they really are the experts on that panel moving forward. And so that's really important that those people that will be working closely with them can be included in that process.
Okay, Article 31, the school safety article, we have made changes here. I had mentioned this earlier as a priority. I wanted to introduce this concept here in the opening paragraph. We are really trying to mirror when we talk about written student discipline procedure in the other part of the contract, that there's a call for a procedure or a protocol that everybody can rely on that is available and being published and evaluated. We believe that a district-wide safety protocol, which is a different extension of that concept, not necessarily just related to discipline, but overarching safety protocol with a threat assessment protocol is something that we would like to see. And so this paragraph is calling for the creation of that, of the state, like a commitment of a district-wide safety committee, come up with a protocol that includes that threat assessment protocol, and that there's a notification and communication process that comes along, with that. And this has come from our folks raising with just straight up concerns about their own safety and well-being. I think we've got some examples.
I think we can all agree safety is like the maximum number one priority, and this article really calls for just a clear system. I think a lot of the language we've added in this contract is just, we want clarity, we want a clear system to follow. When we have safety concerns, I think that's the most crucial time to have a system, so we're not trying to make it up as we go. And we can remain calm, follow the system, keep people safe, and take action efficiently, because we really need to do that with safety. At Clemens, we've had things happen in the past where we added language about a student or community member, just because we noticed a threat or a comment was made by a community member, and we do not have a clear protocol for that. And that really highlighted the need for a system. I know that that's been shared with the district, but my understanding is that's still happening within the safety committee, and it's been about a year, so we'd like to have clarity on that and have everyone on the same page proactively. So it's revisited every year, everyone knows what to do, who to go to. That's all.
Can I ask, when we're talking about safety protocol, threat assessment protocol, are we talking about school-wide and or individual
Individual school.
or individual student? Because we can look at a threat assessment protocol for an individual student. We can look at threat assessment protocol for a school. We can look at, I mean, so it's kind of like, are we talking about both of those?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Overarchingly, like district-wide, but yeah.
Right, because I'm just, if I read this, I can say a district-wide safety protocol that includes threat assessment protocol. But if I'm thinking threat assessment at only an individual student level, I don't want to miss the mark.
The individual student level maybe falls better under Article 13.
Okay,
Under maintenance, class and
Okay.
control and discipline.
back there.
And that's what our thinking was when we wrote this. but
Okay.
we can
And that's fine.
absolutely
I just
adjust.
want to
Yeah.
get my brain geared into the
But
right
I
spot.
hear what you're
Yeah,
saying, and I think it fits maybe better in Article 13 for an individual student, and this is mainly a school policy in Article 31. Does that make sense?
thank you.
I agree. We're just looking for a clear process. This is what happens. It takes away any bias or confusion, and it keeps just people safe, and they understand that's the expectation. And whether it's from a student or a community member or anybody who walks into our building, that makes a threat, that we are like, this is how we treat it. This is, we're gonna fall back on our policy and our procedure. And so it's very clear the next steps that need to happen.
Okay, thank you.
So one quick thing under B, under surveillance video, that there is just an editorial catch that we have, the current contracts, I think it might even say add AB, but it needs to say and, so that's not a substantive change, we're just trying to make it an updated edit there. We did add C, on the building access, security access, which was back to our, we had a couple conversations about keys.
We did.
These seem to be handled differently
In our
across the
buildings,
board,
yes.
from building to building. Some buildings, staff has keys to every single room. Other buildings, staff only has a key to their room. And like, there's buildings that staff doesn't, well, I don't know how many, but can't even get into the front office of their building. So it's a weird process. We don't understand it ourselves, but we're hoping it gets cleaned up.
And I know there's different, I mean, I agree with you, clean it up. There's some differences in the way that the key cores are set up in different schools. In an elementary group, for instance, where there's multiple teachers teaching a same grade level versus a secondary classroom where maybe that's who knows? But for a myriad of reasons, I think when things were built, those cores were established in different ways. But it doesn't mean we can't clean them.
Yeah, we can talk about
Yeah.
it, so.
Absolutely.
So we have one last article here on facilities that I'm gonna pass around to introduce this. I would say that one of the other pieces of feedback that we had about what people, when we're asking questions about, what do you need to be able to do your job? There were a number of things around technology needs that came up that have been referenced already, but that appear here. There's another component to this too, is that we also went in communication with the staff at the Philomath Academy. We start looking at this lens of, we've got this this newer, it's not that new, but like this concept that's different from our historical norms, where you may be able to have people that can work in certain areas that are not exactly the same as the traditional classroom.
Mhm.
And so, and that program is off and running, and now we're going back and asking questions about that, like, what might have you needed to be successful, or what do you need to be able to flourish? And so that conversation starts to get into like an equipment-based, facilities-based conversation about access to certain things that, and maybe in some ways we would just assume, well, of course, like a regular teacher would have access to this, but there are scenarios, there could be new scenarios in the future where things change. And so the team was discussing this with members, looking at some contracts language that is, or there's some contract language that is similar to this in Lincoln County and some other places, but we just broke down some needs and facilities lists for work.
I do want to talk about this, I want to make sure that they're, I want to be pretty clear. I think everybody knows, especially, well,
Thank
the
you.
board knows, and people in here. This is in no way something negative to our technology department. They are amazing. They are absolutely amazing. And so I want to make sure that is clear that that's not what the team is talking about here. We want to make sure that the technology department has the funding they need in order to provide this request here. So that's, I know I work hand in hand with the technology. I'm on the department with them. If they had the funds, they would do this. So that's why I'm asking the district, or we're asking the district, to make it a priority that these needs are met for teachers. And so one is just, we all know that just even basic internet has been a struggle. Just on a day-to-day, making sure connectivity is happening. Making sure, like I've already alluded to the fact that I had to share technology with a staff member, but just making sure that we are updated on technology. This last year has been brutal.
Yep.
Absolutely brutal. The downtime that teachers are dealing with rebooting their systems or waiting for something to upload, to just flat out not functioning at all, has caused just frustration and loss of classroom time. Just making sure that additional devices are available that they need in the classroom when they, as far as printers, scanners, document cameras. Having some sort of interactive whiteboards in classrooms that they're able to use. Again, I understand the district is working on this, but we have been basically scotch taping our everything together. And it's like, oh, well, maybe if I walk over here, or maybe if I wiggle this cable, or maybe if I hop around and turn around 3 times, it will work.
Close all the windows,
It's just
and
like-
turn off all the lights, and maybe you can see it.
Maybe you can see the board.
So for those who are needing or use a projector, that they will be provided a high quality projector with bulbs. Would be great. And anybody that's using a classroom that needs additional microphones or speakers or something that can help out with those acoustically challenging classrooms. And I understand that the downtime with the internet, but also Wi-Fi. It is spotty in almost every single building. And I would even think the admin would agree to this, because some of them can't even get it in their office. But it's just to be able to use Wi-Fi. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I had a student teacher pass out on me in the middle of class when unconscious. And I couldn't use my phone because I was with the student teacher. So I tried to use my cell phone and I have no Wi-Fi. Nothing. But so I'm trying to frantically get a room full of students out of my room and try to get 911 called for the teacher that went down. That's what I'm talking about with the Wi-Fi. It's brutal in different places. I'll let people keep talking on online. Do anybody wants to jump in on curriculum?
My hotspot password is PHS Wi-Fi sucks. And my students know, because when we're desperate, we just all sign on to my hotspot.
There was talk about new laptops, being switched from Microsoft to Google-based kind of systems.
Mhm.
And so there needs to be some training maybe or
Absolutely.
some, attention into that, switch, because it's fairly major.
Definitely.
Include that.
There's new software coming in that we're trained on it, especially if it's something we're using day to day, like this.
There's also something in here about the curriculum, just as far as like having access to the programs that are needed to run curriculum. I know at the lower levels, there's curriculum coming in, and one of the things that's awesome about it is it's got PowerPoint's already made up for every lesson, but we're transitioning to Google. And so what the trainer told staff was, well, you can just create new slides.
Yeah.
But that's a
No.
lot of
Yeah, and
time.
I know about that, and we're
Hard to
engaged in conversations,
And we
but you're
pay
right.
extra for that access to those PowerPoints, so things like that, just making sure that
Got
if it can't be Google based, that our teachers will still have the access to the Microsoft in order to run the PowerPoints, those kinds of things.
And there has been some troubleshooting, but it is rather clunky. To get everything smoothly transitioned over. So there needs to be some work behind the scenes before it's rolled out fully. 100%.
Yeah, it is.
It's gotta work for us.
And I think facilities and maintenance is pretty self-explanatory.
Right, and that was speaking largely to some of the maybe untraditional classrooms that haven't been set up for a very long time. Maybe some newer classrooms that have fewer power outlets. Maybe they were converted more recently and they don't have desks and chairs for students, and some of them are bursting at the seams. And so, and that janitorial support, and obviously that seems like a common sense kind of thing. But it wasn't happening, and so it's just shoring up some of those things in certain buildings.
Okay, so those are our issues. Outside of what I had mentioned before, if we would like to reserve that sick leave bank memorandum, if we need to add anything from that, if not, we're good with that one, just to add that into the record, but that would be it. Those are our issues.
And I'll need to bring folks up to speed on our group about that, the sick leave memorandum.
Yeah.
And its intent and why it was done and why it would stay or not, or things
Yes.
like that, so. Okay, you ready to shift gears? All right. So we brought in the packet, same kind of a thing we did, every article every article that we touched. There are some things that are very, I'll call them low hanging fruit. Because there's it was just things that we looked at and said, let's get clarification. It's something that we have a question about, but it's not gonna be a lengthy deal breaker. So we opened up in Article 1 with status of agreement because we've had conversations at multiple levels before in B where it says PEA as the exclusive representative for the purpose of collective bargaining for all full-time, part-time. Excluded from the union are all administrative, supervisory, classified, confidential, and substitute employees. There's been conversation about should temporary employees be a part of that or not. And so we thought, here we are at the table, so let's raise the question. Is it something that we want to say they've got to be in there? No, but it was just really about the opportunity to raise the question. So that's what some of these are going to be like. We then moved to Article 6, which is the layoff and recall. And it was the only thing, the opportunity to be able to say, do we really need that calculation of net savings chart in this article? Again, deal breaker? Probably not, but it's just raising the question of that inclusion.
Definitely hasn't been used for a long time.
Yeah. Article 8, staff evaluation. There are other things that we have thought about in here. And bless you. And our thing was just the understanding under I, teachers who receive a change of status notice. What's a change of status notice? I mean, that's truly all we're asking, is to be able to say, if it's a different word that we all understand, let's use the different word. But otherwise, I want to be clear on what that is, because I don't know. Dues and payroll, 11, what we wanted to do was to bring this into what's currently happening. And so there's nothing in terms of adjustment in content or process. The old said teachers may elect to receive paychecks via direct deposit to the bank or credit union of their choosing. We edited to say paychecks will be issued to licensed staff members by direct deposit to the bank or credit union of the licensed staff members choosing. In the case of extenuating circumstance, a paper check may be issued. And so all it does is, its design was just to clean up the, let's make sure that it reflects what's actually happening. Yeah.
Do you know, is there anybody still taking paper checks?
Yes, we have a
Do you know
few,
how many?
2, maybe 3. There's not many, but you know, it's kind of like, we just wanted to recognize the extenuating circumstances. We'd rather have everybody. But,
So this wouldn't force them to take this force them to do direct deposit?
this says
No. Okay.
our preference is to do direct deposit. If there are extenuating circumstances that says you can't, then we'll work with you, because we want you to get paid.
Have to explain those extenuating circumstances, or just say that they
Usually it's, I mean, you're the one that deals with the, you know, why people have getting them. A lot of times in certain situations, you know, they won't allow certain online deposits, or, I mean, there's a whole myriad of different reasons. What we don't want to do is get everybody starting to ask for paper checks all over again. So it's something that we'll just continue to gauge as we move forward. Is that accurate? Okay. Article 12 and B4 is going to become important because of an article later, or a piece of this later. And it was the piece that we put in last time about spring conferences. In no case shall a combination of regular workday time and conferences exceed 40 hours per week. We have proposed crossing out no staff or other required meetings will be held on these conference days, simply because we've added in kind of that break time in between. And so again, it's just this piece of conversation of how do we want to take a look at that. Recognizing in school work day that the district, and we both recognize that education involves some professional obligations. And that moves forward into number 3 on the backside. Just to get us started with, employees may be required to participate in no more than 3 unpaid evening activities beyond the scheduled workday, excluding parent-teacher conferences. So, because parent-teacher conferences are already addressed here, and outlined in the other space. What we want to be able to get to is the notion of announcing early on what those days could be, and the things that we're thinking of: open house, transition nights. You know, when we do fifth grade to sixth grade transition, when we do first grade to second grade transition, when we do a kinder open house. It's just the notion of being able to look at what are some of those things that may be within that we want to look at. And so we're just raising that as being able to say, we don't want to be able to have the expectation or anticipation that everything that, because there's still information in the collective bargaining agreement that talks about if I have to supervise at a concert. So that's independent of,
How do you anticipate us keeping record of all this extra time?
what we, the idea, and we could clean up the language, would be, we're gonna name a couple of activities.
Great.
And those would be the activities. The thought, and we haven't had much time to have conversation, would be hopefully that by a certain time early in the year, each school is gonna know what those days would be. And so you're gonna know if there's gonna be 1 or 2 or 3, and what those days are, so that we could plan
So
accordingly.
you're surprised by.
Yeah, so it was just the, right. Yeah, that's, and so the language definitely can be finessed, but it was just those things about what are those things that are we need to do. And you know, recognizing that on open house, when we do it all the time, one of the things that we're looking at is also in that time providing people with opportunities to go to the conferences for their own children, you know, and things like that. So it's not about taking that away, but it's really about being able to say, are there some things that we can just agree to on that?
I think I have a follow-up question too. How would you anticipate it being equitable across buildings?
That's what,
across sites?
that's what we have to talk about, because you know, it's what are those days? So we know open house, for instance, applies to everybody.
Right.
We know that school new student opportunities, and it may just be at that point that staff come in, and I'm thinking about the middle schools, 5th to 6th grade orientation. All the staff members come in, they introduce themselves, talk about themselves, if there's anything that needs to be shared, and then they're gone. They might not have to stay for the whole event, but there's a certain expectation or desire that's there. And so those are things that we have to figure out together about what are those. Good question. And then in E at the bottom, that was really a cleanup for 6th grade outdoor school to reflect what's actually happening in the way that people do this. Yeah, it just cleans it up to match what has been happening. That's all.
Didn't freeze. I have a question. I'm trying to go back and make sure that I understand. On B4, you struck out no staff and other required meetings will be held on these conference days. And then you mentioned that it was gonna have a tie-in later.
It was just to say that in these up to 3 extras, parent-teacher conferences aren't a part of those 3 extras. And we didn't want people to say, sweet, I don't have to do parent-teacher conferences anymore.
I think he's going back a page even further, Susan.
Well, no, I think it's for number 4.
Yeah,
Why did you strike the no staff or
Yeah.
other required
Oh.
meetings will be
That's
held on
pretty
conference
I
days?
did.
think that people.
No, go ahead. That was the notion of, we've talked about on those conference days, being able to, especially if we do a half day into an evening, providing people with a break at the end of their school day, before they have to go straight into conferences. And, if there's opportunity for, a meeting that needs to happen or people to get together, does that break time warrant that opportunity? Again, it's just a question more than it is a, thou must. So,
So it's specifically related to like a breakup in the day during
Mhm.
conferences.
Yep.
And you might-
yeah,
Can I speak to Lois? Susan?
yeah,
There's also, some buildings use the days differently,
Correct.
right? And so sometimes there aren't actually meetings taking place. And so there's it's not extra time, but there might be like a 4-hour chunk of time that we did a month ago. That's the expectation for that day, 'cause we moved the day around to meet what our needs were in the schedule. So sometimes there's also like, well, we actually do need to meet as a content group to talk about curriculum planning or the next step. So there's meetings that take place that is beneficial, right? Or just to help mess you on. But if it says in the contract on these conference days, it's conference day maybe at a different building, but not at your own building. Like, you gotta get work done still.
Yeah.
And so it frees it up. I mean, so it's just, it was restrictive before. So how to get to the point of where it allows for some flexibility of what the needs are within the building.
I appreciate that you're recognizing that it's different at the elementary level vastly around student teacher conferences. We've been seeing that for years.
Thanks, Steve. Does that
Okay.
answer your question?
Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Classroom control and discipline, on H on the back. I wasn't sure if that was a formatting issue. From the prior contract, if we really meant to exclude that, or, because we said the district will adhere to guidelines within current Oregon revised statutes. And then there's just kind of this litany of stuff. And so it was really about, does the content need to be there? Does the content need to be different, or was it an error in the formatting of the contract? Again, just a question of, I don't know. So that's all that was just to be able to say, what does that need to look like or not? And just explanation, that's all. 15 supplemental retirement, all we did with that was clean it up. So in places where there are no longer eligible employees in those categories, we removed. So when you see the strikeouts, those are all pieces that no longer exist, or we have no people in those categories that qualify anymore.
That's C and D of 15.
Let's see, employees who choose to resign during the contract year.
It's B.
Oh, B, yep, yep, yep. So it's work after retirement, employment of licensed staff members. So, yeah, you have to keep going backwards
Yes.
into it.
Okay.
Jennifer had to explain it to me 3 or 4 times because I had the language wrong. But, we wanted to put it out there more for review, but from the standpoint of being able to say any of the cleanup is really about there's nobody eligible anymore in those categories. And that was the attempt to clean up the language within the contract. And so the ask is really that you either trust or double check our work to make sure that we're up to date and don't have language that doesn't fit. So 16 paid leaves. On the back of that with C, we took out the incentives. Because there's only a handful of people that qualifies for anymore. It used to be that there was,
Sorry, did you want to touch on section?
Yeah, I was like.
my bad, my bad. Back up,
Section 2,
where are you?
supplemental retirement plan.
Yep, let me get there. Oh, yeah, the insurance under section 2, it's continued to say the district shall contribute up to $870 per month. For working teachers insurance, and that has never been adjusted. And so the idea of bringing that into where people are at. There's not very many people in this anymore, but the idea was if we've got people still sitting there, we need to be able to make sure that the insurance rate's comparable. Thank you, I appreciate that. That was the difference. The paid leaves, again, it's for a handful of people, it was just, can we remove that part of it? And then the accumulated sick leave benefits, we just changed the language to reflect what PERS uses. And so there's no change in what the content is, the change is it just uses the PERS language instead of what we had in there. And it's the notion of being able to also acknowledge that the program applies only to tier 1 and tier 2 employees. So it was just trying to explain that out in a little bit more detail. That's all.
Let me clarify, you're not taking anything away from those two tiers.
Nope. It's just the same thing, but it's something that we can opt to do, and we just felt like it needed to be a little bit more clear in how it was written. And so they call it an unused sick leave program in the PERS system. And so we wanted to use the PERS language.
Unused sick leave program?
Yep.
Thank you.
Can you go back on the incentives? Because I was catching up a little slow. Could you explain
Sorry.
the rationale about why you want to eliminate that?
Because there's really only a handful of people that qualify for that. And so when we talked about it, we said, if there's half a dozen people that it qualifies for, do we want to keep it or not? And I mean, that's just the question. That's all.
So you're saying that the majority of folks are using leave in excess of these numbers?
Yes.
And part of the problem can be, it's like when I went through school as a kid, and it was a big deal to have perfect attendance. Well, that meant you went to school sick sometimes. And you really, after going through COVID, we don't want kids going to school sick. If they're truly sick, they should stay home. Same thing with teachers. And so if teachers are coming to school sick just so they can get a tiny stipend, I think that could be problematic. I can't imagine very many people would do that, but I just, you know.
There's strong like mutual interest from administration having staff, have good attendance, right? So certainly, I also, as new to this, I just had a question like how arduous is, how much, investment and time in managing that in the list and who's here and there. So that was just a wonder from my colleague Jennifer saying it is kind of a lot to track and all that. So it's just that was a wonder about that.
And then the last one was my shot at being able to say, do we really need to leave sabbatical leave in there? Last time we said yes, but we haven't done sabbatical in I have no
We
knowledge.
haven't had a member use
Right.
it.
No, this is year 17 for me and nobody's used it
The
in
last
that
time I
time.
remember was Tom Thompson, when he was still a science teacher here.
Okay.
So it's just the possibility. That's all.
I did want to notice one thing under I, you just need to add a return after the word Oregon. It's just missing the return
Oh, okay.
after the title of the section.
Thank you.
Oh, gotcha.
Semantics. 17 other leaves. We noticed in leave of absence that there was no date for someone to be able to let us know if they plan to return or not. And so we wanted to match that with the March 15th date of when we do kind of renewal, non-renewal. The difficulty is if we don't hear from somebody until June, that they might not be coming back. We just thought if there's a date in there, then that way we have some information for decision-making purposes. The addition that we put in there for consideration is short-term unpaid leaves. We are seeing a number across the whole district, across all categories of people taking unpaid leaves. And they're not taking them for FMLA or something else like that necessarily. And so we wanted to be able to address that in some way, shape, or form. So again, suggestion. In non-emergency situations, it's really talking about notice. And then saying leaves of more than 3 days require the approval of the superintendent. The district shall continue to pay health insurance premiums during the 3 days or less of unpaid leave. If a person is on unpaid leave of more than 3 days, other than FMLA, on the first working day of the month, district benefits for unpaid days will be at the employee's expense should the employee wish to continue health insurance through reimbursement. Now, we realize that there are some situations where if I've got a family of 5 and we all have pneumonia, that's a problem, and we need to take a look at unpaid leave when people get into those situations. The struggle that we have with putting any language out there is that difference versus I've used all my paid leave and I want to go to Disneyland. So I'm gonna use unpaid leave that doesn't put me in an FMLA spot and it's just a struggle when we want consistency of staff being around with kids. So again, it was just starting to say, what might we be able to put out there that either starts to address or think about or understand a little bit more about, the use of unpaid leave?
Has this been a problem for our district?
Yes. It's becoming more of a problem, yes. And like I said, it's across all categories of employment. It's not, a licensed issue. It's an everywhere. And so, really, again, it's raising it to be able to say, as a systems issue, are there some things that, because we're open and in discussion, we might want to, consider? That's all.
There are detriments to the district in this situation besides just the consistency of staffing.
It's hard to be able to deal with the consistency of staffing, it's not nice in Red Rover. Because sometimes, somebody will say I'm sick, but then does it come up whether it's paid or unpaid or, how it's set together. And so some of it, could be that there's some systems responsibility around that. We all know that if we put sick leave into, Red Rover, it's gonna automatically go out and ask for a substitute. If I put other leave in, it's gonna ask me for approval. So I might not have any paid leave left, but then I go into Red Rover and I put in sick leave. When I know I don't necessarily have it, but I know that then that will go out and pick up a substitute. And are we catching paid versus unpaid, and how we're being able to do business? But we also want to look at, the other thing that we've realized across the years is we've increased, budget expenses for, leave. Just as a general rule, without any agreement or anything else like that, because we know that people are taking more of the days that are allocated to them in a year than they used to, even 10 years ago. And, there's nothing wrong with that. We realize that people have a need to have and to utilize the leave that they've got, and we need to be able to administer that. And so we've planned accordingly to be able to say, we need to up the amounts that we put into sick leave for people, because it used to be you could calculate and say, well, on average, we would guess that, this is years ago, that somebody might take three days, 4 days off. But it's not uncommon for people, for any staff in the course of a year to take 8, 9, 10 days off in the course of a school year, of which people are entitled to. And so we need to be able to make sure that we have that. We need to make sure we can accommodate that, because we're certainly not going to tell people you can't take your leave when we gave it to you, and people need it. And so it's just kind of a way of how do we look at what we're doing, so. We put in policy handbook, and I noticed you did also. We had talked about when it says the district shall provide newly employed licensed employees a copy of the Philomath School District Policy Handbook. We don't print them anymore. And so the idea of being able to pull them down from the web page was the idea of being able to say they're available online. But we also noticed that you have put in your proposal that you want to make sure new people get them. And so that's the back and forth of the proposal. So teacher preparation time, we just put in licensed staff shall not have required student supervision responsibilities during prep period or lunchtime. So we're making sure that we've got that accommodated for. If somebody chooses to have students in their classroom at lunch or have something going on, that's not a required. But we want to make sure that we're looking out for the pieces and parts there. We figured school safety was going to come back around. And so we wanted to be listeners for this initial meeting. And we put in something about behavioral information, that started to get at, within the legal parameters, information, including behavior goals and required behavioral modifications will be made available as soon as possible to all members assigned to teach students eligible for special education. It sounds like what you want, and I get it and understand it completely, is broader than just special education. And I hear that. Members with concerns about student with behavioral health issues shall contact a school administrator. So again, knowing that this was going to be an item of concern, and there will be more.
When you say members assigned, do you just mean case managers specifically, or do you mean classroom teachers?
It would be
and
members-
IAs
Members
and
involved in
such?
teaching the student.
Anyone at all?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And that's a good clarification. The other piece of that is in some situations, and it's not just specific, it's not specific to Philomath, it's everywhere. Not everybody can know what happens in a particular situation. So if the entire school staff is expecting to know what Susan Halliday did to get herself in an expulsion hearing, people can't all know.
Oh, that's easy.
So, and we've got to get accustomed to when are those times that we can know and when are those times that we can't. So, we talked about not going with 18 and 19 tonight. We do know that increasing the insurance cap is important. We echo the conversations and the comments about it's one of the lowest that there is in the state. So it's recognized that that needs to change and be adjusted. For compensation, we know about salary. We need to do a salary adjustment and are prepared to do so. We want to look at the co-curricular schedule as well. A couple of things for us that caused us not to bring that information today is we just found out last Friday the reconciliation of the 23-24 school year, because Jennifer lives in 3 school years all at the same time. That's a part of her world, is you got to reconcile one, be in another, and be started planning into another. So we just found out on Friday what that reconciliation which will be. Because we lost students, that means that we're going to lose the money, and what they do is just take it off our last payment in the spring. We didn't know what that was going to be, and so until we know what we could expect from that, it's kind of hard to make some decisions and determinations. The other thing that we're waiting on is there is an equalization grant for the local option levy, which is considerable. And we've been told that we should know about that soon. And soon has been last week, they were supposed to let us know. So that's another piece of the puzzle. I remember, I think it was 2 bargaining cycles ago, we came with a proposal for a COLA. And again, when you talk about what's real, we came with one of those lowball proposals, and it was not received well at all. And so that was the other piece of it that said we could do a swag proposal, and I'm sure everybody understands what that goes for. And we don't want to do it. And so it's just waiting on some of those big pieces. That was the part where we said, when we decide how we proceed tonight, in terms of how we spend the rest of our time, that could be something that we would be prepared to bring back next time. Or if that is something that as we prepare, we give to you and Jason to be able to share with the district team, to be able to have it mulled over a little bit before we get together again. That's a consideration as well. So that's our reason for those two.
When's next budget committee meeting? Or
The budget committee meeting is Tuesday.
Tuesday?
This is, yeah, this is the district's budget committee. Yeah.
I would encourage PEA to send somebody, because the last couple times they haven't had, I don't think we've had any PEA members there.
I don't know.
First official.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this will be the first official meeting, the other 2 work
Yeah.
sessions.
And then like you added the notion of a new article on facilities. I also know from the co-curricular schedule, as we address that, that there's been conversation about what gets stipended, what gets extra days, what doesn't, and why, and you know, how we move forward with that. So that's another piece of the puzzle that we just haven't had all the opportunities to be able to put that together. That could be a contract piece, it could be a memorandum of agreement, to be able to say, we have work to do in this area, depending upon where we land. So that's what we brought. So we're looking at 6 o'clock. We have had supposedly a 6:30 stop. I know we need to talk to one another. Do we want to go away and talk to one another for 20 minutes and see where we are and then come back together? Or do we want to just say, we're done for the evening, caucus and do your thing, and then we will come back around again?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that like, when we're looking at next meeting agenda, I mean, not to be worried that we wouldn't be able to complete the task in 20 minutes, but I think that
I agree.
our, I think we would be coming at this by wanting to go through and start with all of the articles that you have in here that you have raised that we haven't.
And likewise,
And work on, you know, some of these were questions, some of these you had proposals in there. Look at what are potential responses to those with the goal of trying to get all of them. And yeah, and I think that that's a possibility, but I don't want to commit to that right now.
oh, I understand.
In case we,
Yep,
in
understand.
case we find that we would say maybe it's better to do this, but I think that we would be willing to commit to responding back to you with an agenda and saying, we can start next time with responses to these 6 articles or whatever it might be that it comes up with. And go from there. I think that, you know, we would be interested in, and I'm sure that the members are interested in hearing your compensation proposal.
Yes.
I understand. What we can talk more about the, I don't have any questions about the reconciliation. I'm aware of that in the 3-year process, and so we didn't talk about the equalization grant. Might be interesting to hear what that amount could possibly be, but separate from all that, I mean, I think that if I don't know if there's necessarily, we would say, hey, we need to get your compensation proposal in the interim. That can be nice sometimes, but I think one of the drawbacks is being able to hear it all in person from the team, right? It doesn't come with an email. So I don't know, we could talk about that and let you know if we have any strong objections one way or the other.
Yeah.
And I think we could email you or text you where to get back on that one.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, unless there was something that you really wanted to come back and talk about for 6:30, I think we'd be going and wanting to get started on that work while we have people
Yeah,
here.
and that
Before they
was,
get angry, that's what they tell me.
yeah.
They're gonna get angry.
Yeah, and that was my thought also, was to be able to do that and be able to start working in that way. What was I thinking here? I also understand that I will bring back the next time some of the articles we didn't address that or weren't raised, that we may want to look at a tentative agreement on the next time we get together. But I also understand the not wanting to approve anything we brought forward tonight, because it could be also that whatever we come back with or whatever the compensation and insurance are could impact other articles that you would say, we can't approve this now because this impacts that. And so I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
We talked about that as a possibility, that would likely be an agenda item for next time for
Yep.
articles that nobody's opened and don't have any of those connections that we can make some progress and sign some agreements.
Separability comes to mind. So,
Yeah, there are some of those that don't tend to change. Okay,
Okay.
does that work to then work maybe by email, other communication to set the agenda for the next
Yep.
meeting?
absolutely.
Great.
Mhm. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
thank you, audience.
Right. Back into the.